Hello and welcome to the last lecture of this series, Literary Terms and Figures of Speech, where in today's session we are going to look at this term comedy and its types. If we describe this term comedy, then we can define it as comedy is a literary genre and a type of dramatic work that is amusing and satirical in its tone, mostly having a cheerful ending. Now, after this definition, we can get the sense that this term comedy or this genre comedy is in direct contrast with tragedy, which we have completed in the preceding lecture, where tragedy deals with the sorrowful and tragic events of life. The chief purpose of comedy is to amuse the audience or to make the people laugh. And this phrase, satirical in its tone, becomes significant when this drama or this type of drama, comedy, is used to highlight the follies, weaknesses, hypocrisies, and the vanities of the people concerned in order to reform the society. So, comedy can be divided broadly into five types: romantic comedy, comedy of humors, comedy of manners, sentimental comedy, and tragicomedy. So, let's begin with the romantic comedy. As its name is suggesting, that romantic comedy deals with the romantic themes or romantic relationships. Its theme is love, where we can witness the love affairs, idealized love affairs, in which turns out to be comic. Now, how it turns out to be comic? So, this comic element out of these love affairs can be derived from the clumsy efforts of the lovers to get together, as they both like each other, but each of them is not is unsure that the other likes him or not. So in order to their attempt or that's why they end up in doing certain activities, certain absurd activities, which turns out to be very nervous and awkward behavior, and which also results in situational comedy. So that's why in this way romantic comedy evokes laughter. And there is a very famous and popular example of this romantic comedy is A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare, in which there are so many lovers who for a brief period fall in and fall out of love, and these many lovers at the end unite, though they unite, but they also go through certain comic events and elements which gives a good tonic of laughter to the audience. And the main feature of romantic comedy what we witness here is that their real world problems, their actual problems, get resolved magically as the enemies reconcile with each other, and it ends up with the true lovers unite, or the union of true lovers at the end. Next one is comedy of humors. Now, this comedy of humors focuses on character or a range of characters. Now, before we dive into the details of this type of comedy, which is comedy of humors, let's get the sense of this word humor in this context, in the context of comedy of humors. This word humor is derived from Latin word liquid, and according to medieval and Renaissance medical theory, human body contains four humors or four liquids, which includes phlegm, blood, yellow bile, and black bile. Now, what this theory suggests that human beings have a balance. When human beings have a balance of all these four humors, then they remain healthy. We can say that a very healthy mind in a healthy body sort of character or personality. Now, what this comedy of humors do, as Ben Jonson is a very proponent, he is considered as the first dramatist who conceived and popularized this type of comedy, and he has in the late 16th century, and he has written many plays revolves around or based on this sort of comedy. And so what I wanted to tell is that how with the humor and the theory, the medical theory, what it suggests in the context of, in the relation of humor, that whenever there is an imbalance of these humors in any person or any character, that particular character exhibits an overriding trait or a dominant humor, which the humor which is which has dominancy out of all the four. Now, due to that dominant humor, that person ends up in behaving, or is we observe that his conduct, his desires, and his personality is dominated by that certain type of humor. Now, taking this the advantage of this very human or very biological thing, Ben Jonson created many humorous plays like Every Man Out of His Humor, where each person, each character is suffering from this imbalance of humor, and this and how this imbalance, how this system of humor makes a particular character to behave in a certain way. And this overriding or this dominant humor also makes the person a possessor of a peculiar quality, which we can say that he has created many caricatures which has a certain remarkable or particular qualities. In this way, comedy of humors evoke humor or laughter, and as you come to know that Ben Jonson is one of the proponents of this sort of comedy. And the third one is comedy of manners, that deals with the behavior of people. Now, in this type of comedy, there is always a satirical tone in this language, and the use of witty language in this type of comedy is meant to highlight the artificial values of the people concerned. Which type of people? Especially the people who belong to the upper class society. In this way, comedy of manners is well suited to expose the hypocrisies or the superficial values of the upper class society. And how they do it, these all the hypocrisies or the vanities are satirized by the dramatists by foregrounding or by exposing the issues of adultery, fortune hunting, and the commercialization of love and marriage, as it was in vogue at that time. It was in trend in that time, just like a mercenary venture. Love was not as sacred, or marriage was not that serious affair. It was just like a mercenary venture. So these all the manners and artificialities were highlighted and exposed in this sort of drama, in this genre of drama, in this type of comedy, which is comedy of manners. And this type of comedy, which is comedy of manners, has its great day during the Restoration period, as it was a dominant form of dramatic genre at that time. And the masterpieces in the sense, the very witty, cynical, and epigrammatic style in comedy of manners, in the sense the complete masterpieces were created by these dramatists like William Wycherley and William Congreve, by their creations like The Country Wife and The Way of the World. And this tradition of epigrammatic dialogue and artificial plotting and elaborate setting was carried on by this Anglo-Irish playwright Oscar Wilde, with his publication of these hilarious plays, Lady Windermere's Fan and The Importance of Being Earnest. And in the late 20th century also, we witness this comedy of manners in the famous works of these British writers Noel Coward and Somerset Maugham, and these Americans Philip Barry and S.N. Berryman. And then there is a sentimental comedy, and this sentimental comedy is an 18th century dramatic genre which appeared in the literary circles as a reaction. It was a reaction against the obscenity and indecency of the excuse me, obscenity and indecency of the comedy of manners in, or we can say, English Restoration plays. So this was the sentimental comedy, which was a reaction against the vulgarity or obscenity which they call at that time of comedy of manners. And these sentimental, or the writers of these sentimental comedies, were actually the moralist who wanted to teach morals through the medium of the plays. So we can find in these sentimental comedies that they are really moral comedies, in which the predominant element is moral and virtue from beginning to ending. Excuse me. And this sentimental comedy was characterized by emotions of pity and sympathy. What this statement is conveying is that there, in these type of comedies, there was an incorporation of such scenes which were excessively emotional, or excessively emotional, or elaborately they were full of sympathy and pity, which evokes a great amount of pity and sympathy. So that's why there was a great emotional appeal. And we can say that in this sentimental comedy, humor was replaced with pathos, and the humorous situation by pathetic situations, and it lacked wit or humor in the sense like there were no those sparkling dialogues as we can see in comedy of manners. They were not so witty. In that sense, they lack wit. The famous writers of sentimental comedies are Colley Cibber and George Fraker, with their creations like Love's Last Shift and The Constant Couple, respectively. And this sentimental comedy is the Conscious Lovers is one of the famous and popular example. It was written by Sir Richard Steele. Actually, it is a story of or it deals with the trials and tribulations of its virtuous, penniless heroine Indiana, but it ends on a happy note. Because there is a discovery at the end that Indiana is actually an heiress. So this is a sentimental comedy. And this sentimental comedy also coexisted with the other conventional comedies like Oliver Goldsmith's She Stoops to Conquer and The Rivals by Sheridan, which were actually comedy of manners. Then this type of comedy, which is tragicomedy, and which is specifically mentioned in your syllabus too. So what is tragicomedy? Tragicomedy is the dramatic genre which contains both tragic and comedic elements. We can say it is a blend of comic and tragic elements. So and in tragicomedy, as its name is suggesting, that in tragicomedy we often find that after a series of many unfortunate events, the ending is always happy. We always find that the end is always on a happy note. Now, if we want to see the significance of this tragicomedy in literature, then we can say, or I would say, if I have to tell the significance of this genre of drama or genre of comedy, this type of comedy, then I would say that the significance or the importance of tragicomedy lies in the fact that it actually focuses on describing the dual nature of reality. What is the dual nature of reality? Reality actually exists. In reality, both the modes of life, tragic and comic, both the modes of life coexist. And with the help of tragic comedy, a playwright interweaves these both the elements of life in order to showcase the real view of life, which is both tragic and comic. And if we see the argument given by this famous Roman comic playwright Plautus, what he said that life contains tragic and comic, both the elements. So in the more literary way, if we see in as per the literature, then in literature, plays were always written in a very strict confinement. In which type of confinement? That they always were written according to the strict, or we can say systemized rules of either tragedy or comedy. Both the modes have their own conventions, so the works or the plays worked within these confines. But this is the tragicomedy, which allows the plays to explore the depths and paradoxes of human experience, which we find unavailable in very strict tragedy or comedy. So that's what we can justify the significance or the importance of tragicomedy. And this play, The Merchant of Venice, is again the very famous and popular example of traditional tragicomedy. And this in this play, though this play has comedic structure, but it has tragic character too, like Shylock, and it has tragic events like Antonio's loss of life, but he is not really dead, but there is a tragic incident when, and it seems that Antonio has lost his life. So there are tragic characters and tragic events in this particular tragicomedy, but it ends on a happy note when the lovers unite, or with the union of lovers. But at the end, the audience are left with the taste of Shylock's sufferings. And also when the play ends, then we find that there is a union of lovers, and Antonio is also now out of any danger, or Antonio is also saved from any tragic incident. But readers have also this pain, or this sadness related to Shylock, related to the sufferings of Shylock. So in this way, this play ends on a happy and gloomy note as well. That's why this play, The Merchant of Venice, can be classified as tragic comedy. And the most notable tragic comedies of William Shakespeare are the Winter's Tale, All's Well That Ends Well, and The Tempest. Now, before I wind up this lecture, I would like to end this lecture on this note, that with modern tragicomedy. Actually, this modern tragicomedy is used synonymously with absurdist drama. In the modern time, what is absurdist drama is also called sometimes modern tragicomedy. Because why it is called so? Absurdist drama, why it has become the synonym, or why modern tragicomedy has become the synonym of absurdist drama? Because it is based on this premise that in the modern time, or in the current time, or in a particular, or anyway, we can talk it in the special context of modern time, that when a man is left with no response except laughter. Because when man is faced, or when man faces the tragic emptiness and meaninglessness of his existence, then man has no response except laughter. And that's what is tragicomedy or absurdist drama. And there are famous examples of this type of tragicomedy. Modern tragicomedies are Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot and Endgame. And if we see this famous and the most finest, very finely written tragicomedy, Waiting for Godot, then we can see that in this play, several actions, gestures, situations, and several situations or acts are included in order to evoke laughter. And several music devices are also used to create laughter. But during the course of time, we find that the main characters of this play, Vladimir and Estragon, just they indulge themselves in meaningless activities, and we see that overall this drama or this comedy is a kind of dark comedy, and that's what we can see if we see this particular work with the lens of uh, type of comedy or a modern tragicomedy. Then we find that it is a sort of dark, very dark comedy. And there are many plays written by Harold Pinter which also falls in this category of absurdist drama or modern tragicomedy, like The Dumb Waiter and The Caretaker. These are some of the examples, and that's what comedy and its types are. And thank you for your attention, and I look forward to see you in the next session.